Among the gravestones of a bleak churchyard, set in the desolate marsh country, great expectations began. Here Pip met Magwitch, the escaped convict. His whole life was to be shaped by this meeting, and one other meeting soon to come. In our first film on the novel, we analyzed some of the elements common to all novels. Note how many of these elements are present in the first chapter of Great Expectations. The story has started off with a bang. Dickens knows how to create suspense at once. The plot, which will turn on the mysterious relationship between Pip and the convict Magwitch, has begun to unroll. Two major characters, Pip and Magwitch, have been added to the population of our minds. The brooding atmosphere of the whole book has been partly established by the description of the lonely countryside, its flat marshes, the low leaden line of the river, the cold wind blowing from the sea. The shape or form of the novel seems to suggest itself. It sounds so far like the horizontal novel of incident, arranged chronologically, and that's what it will turn out to be. But the first chapter does more than suggest story, plot, characters, setting, and shape. It draws the first faint lines of the patterns of some of the themes which make up the novel's deeper content. One of these themes is the theme of the prison. The prison, both as fact and symbol, had a strange fascination for Dickens. Remember Dr. Manette in A Tale of Two Cities? Well, as we probe deeper and deeper into Great Expectations, we shall find that it is pervaded by the idea of imprisonment. In this very first scene, we met a man with a great iron on his leg, ordering Pip to bring him a file. That file will reappear in the story. We will meet criminals and ex-criminals, criminal lawyers and jailers, and prison scenes. But the prison in Great Expectations is more than a literal prison. It is a prison of the imagination. We have seen Magwitch trapped in his leg irons. But his mind, too, is in prison, as we shall discover. Little Pip also has become a captive of his fear of Magwitch, a captive of the secret between them. But, we discover as we read on, Pip is fated to become a prisoner of Magwitch in a deeper sense. For his life, though he will remain unaware of it for many years, is to lie in the hands of the convict whom in his childish terror he had befriended. From this first dreadful moment, Magwitch and Pip are linked together. It is not until much later, when the terrifying brute and the terrified child have changed their whole relationship, that both win to freedom. I said that this meeting was one of the two which would shape Pip's whole career. It is time for the second meeting, time for Dickens to draw the sides of that strange triangle which connects Pip, Estella, Miss Havisham. To Pip, a simple country boy, Miss Havisham's house is legendary. Behind its grim walls, behind its windows barred with iron, lives an immensely rich and grim lady. The house, the old unused brewery, the wilderness of empty casks and barrels in the brewery yard, all, as Dickens writes, have a certain sour remembrance of better days lingering about them. Pip, obeying a strange summons to come and play at the house, is admitted by a young girl, very pretty and very proud. What makes these characters, Pip and Estella and Miss Havisham, live in our minds?
Come along, boy.
Perhaps it's because they're like personages in a fairy tale. The poor woodcutter's son, the princess, and the witch.
Go in. After you, miss. Don't be ridiculous, boy. I'm not going in. Havisham.
Who is it?
Pip, ma'am.
Pip?
Mr. Pumblechook's boy, ma'am. Come to play.
Come nearer. Let me look at you. Come close. Come nearer. Well, what do you think that is? That, where those cobwebs are.
I can't guess what it is, ma'am.
It's a great cake. It's a bride cake. It's mine. Look at me. You're not afraid of a woman who's never seen the sun since you were born?
No.
Do you know what I touch here?
Yes, ma'am.
What do I touch?
Your heart.
Broken. I'm tired. I want diversion. I've done with men and women. Play. Sometimes I have sick fancies. I have a sick fancy to see some play. There. There. Play. 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 Are you sullen and obstinate?
No, ma'am. I'm very sorry for you, ma'am. I'm very sorry I can't play just now. But it's so new here, and so strange, and so fine.
Call Estella. Call Estella, you can do that. Call Estella at the door.
"20 minutes to 9. Miss Havisham's emotional life had stopped years ago, at 20 minutes to 9. But Pip's emotional life is ready to begin. This is the moment of its beginning.
It's your own, my dear, one day. And you will use it well. Now let me see you play with this boy.
With this boy? Why, he's a common labouring boy.
Well, you can break his heart.
You can break his heart. We feel at once that Miss Havisham, like Magwitch, has a mania. The stopped clock, the bride cake, the spider webs, all a part of her obsession. Estella is a tool of that obsession. Estella is being trained as if she were an animal to revenge Miss Havisham on the world of men, the world which has betrayed her. Pip will also become a tool of that obsession, all the more willingly because he himself will become obsessed by Estella. These three human beings, the innocent young boy, the cold, cruel young girl, the half-mad woman who has shut out the light of day, who has stopped her life's clock at 20 minutes to 9, all three are imprisoned behind walls created by their own minds. Will these walls ever fall? Yes, but not before they've become much higher, much stronger than they are now. In our last film, we spoke of the Victorian admiration for respectability. They called it that. Today we call it status. To the Victorian middle class, respectability had almost the force of a religion. It had to do, you remember, with the idea of being a gentleman, with wealth and display, with looking down on your social inferiors. Now, in a way, although the story takes place during the reign of William IV, Great Expectations is a novel about this strange Victorian religion of respectability, gentility, give it any name you like. Pip's journey through life is a search for respectability. And, as we learn, when Pip finds out at last that his respectability has been won only by the use of money given him by a criminal, the most unrespectable of wretched beings, his whole life seems to fall in ruins about him. When was this passion to be a gentleman born in Pip? We've just watched its birth in the scene of a few minutes ago. Pip is bewildered when Miss Havisham orders him to play.
But it's so new here, and so strange, and so fine.
He is bewildered because this is his first encounter with a kind of life different from his humble one at the forge, from his sister's kitchen where he and Joe Gargery eat their bread and butter. Miss Havisham and Estella are different from Joe and Mrs. Joe. They're so strange, so fine. And then he hears Estella's scornful voice.
Who is this boy? Why, he's a common laboring boy.
And something is born in his heart. The first dim beginnings of a desire to escape from a life of simple toil into the glamorous life of the gentleman. And that brings us to Joe Gargery, perhaps the finest character in a book full of rich characters.
Here we are, Pip.
Joe, of course, is not a gentleman in the Victorian acceptance of the word, and never will be.
Yes, you're right for an old chap.
And from this fact, and from Pip's eventual realization years later of the true character of Joe Gargery, is woven one of the main threads of the novel.
Blow up, Pip. Blow up, old chap.
It is the first day of Pip's apprenticeship at the forge. For Joe, naturally, this is a wonderful day. But as for Pip, Pip had once believed in the forge, Dickens writes, as the glowing road to manhood and independence. But now the forge seems to him coarse and common, and he would not have Miss Havisham or Estella see him on this day on any account. In Estella's words, he feels that he is indeed nothing but a common laboring boy. The years pass, and Pip's life falls into a regular routine of labor.
Morning, Joe. Morning, Pip.
But he's no happier now than he was on his first working day. He's still haunted by the fear that sooner or later, with blackened face and hands doing the coarsest part of his work, he'll be seen by Estella, and that she'll exult over him and despise him. What Pip does not know, of course, is that his life, which he considers miserable and degrading, is soon to change in a way he could not even have dreamed.
I have reason to believe there is a blacksmith here by name Joseph or Joe Gargery. Which is the man?
I am that man.
You have an apprentice commonly known as Pip.
Yeah, I am Pip.
My name is Jaggers, and I'm a lawyer in London. Joseph Gargery, I am the bearer of an offer to relieve you of this young fellow, your apprentice. You would not object to cancel his indentures at his request and for his good. You would want nothing for so doing.
Well, Lord forbid that I should want anything for not standing in Pip's way.
Lord forbidding is pious, but not to the purpose. The question is, do you want anything?
The answer is no.
Very well. Recollect the admission you have just made, and don't try to go from it presently.
Who's it going to try?
I don't say anyone is. But now I return to this young fellow. And the communication I've got to make is that he has great expectations. I am instructed to communicate to him that he will come into a handsome property. Further, I am instructed to communicate to him the desire of the present possessor of the property that he be removed from this present sphere of life and brought up as a gentleman. In a word, as a young fellow of great expectations. And now, Mr. Pip, you must understand first that the name of the person who is your liberal benefactor must be kept a profound secret until such times as that person chooses to reveal it. No, it may be years hence. Secondly, you are distinctly to understand that you are positively prohibited from making any inquiries on this head. If you have any suspicion in your own breast, keep that suspicion in your own breast. If you have any objection to this, now is the time to mention it. Speak out.
I have no objection, sir.
I should think not. Now, Mr. Pip, to details. There is lodged in my hands a sum of money amply sufficient for your suitable education and maintenance. You will please consider me as your guardian. I tell you at once that I am paid for my services. Otherwise, I would not render them. When can you come to London?
I suppose I can come directly, sir.
First, you should have some suitable clothes to come in. They should not be working clothes. You will want some money. Shall I leave you 20 guineas? Well, Joseph Gargery, you look dumbfounded.
I am.
It was understood that you wanted nothing for yourself, remember?
It were understood and it are understood.
But what if it was in my instructions to make you a present as compensation?
As compensation for what?
For the loss of his services?
If he's that hearty welcome to go free with his services to honour and fortune as no words can tell him. But if you think money can make compensation to me for the loss of the little child, what come to the forge, and ever the best of friends...
Mrs. Gargery, I warn you, this is your last chance. No half measures with me. If you mean
I mean to say, if you come into my place a bull baiting and a badgering me, come out and fight.
Joe, please,
As I mean to say, as such, if you're a man, come on.
Joe! Joe!
Well, Mr. Pip, I think the sooner you leave here, as you are to be a gentleman, the better.
Thus, with all the wonderful unreality and abruptness of a fairy story, news comes of Pip's great expectations. Joe Gargery is not impressed until he realizes how much it means to Pip. As for Pip himself, he is all too ready to say goodbye to the forge with its light, its warmth, its honesty, ready to say goodbye to Joe, of whom the forge is the symbol. And so, within a matter of days, Pip is off to London, to a life of great expectations. Here, at the center of English life, it is time to receive his first lesson in the ways of the world. He receives it from a curious young man named Herbert Pocket, a young man whose nose he had once bloodied as a boy in the abandoned garden of Miss Havisham's moldering mansion. But this second meeting, in the great bustling city of London, is more congenial.
Here, my dear Pip, is the dinner. Your first, I believe, in London.
Yes, it is.
I beg of you to take the top of the table.
No.
Because the dinner is of your providing.
No, please. I won't hear of it.
Oh, as you wish. Well, do sit down, eh?
Herbert,
Yes? My dear Pip.
as you know, I've been brought up as a blacksmith in a country place, and I know very little about the ways of politeness. I would take it as a great kindness if you will give me a hint now and then, whenever you see me going wrong.
With pleasure. Though I venture to prophesy that you'll want very few hints. But let me introduce the topic, my dear Pip, by mentioning that in London it is not the custom to put the knife in the mouth, for fear of accidents.
Of course.
And that while the fork is reserved for that use, it's not put further in the mouth than necessary.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's scarcely worth mentioning. Only it's as well to do as other people do, don't you think?
Oh, I do, yes.
Now, where were we in our little talk? Oh, yes, we were discussing Miss Havisham's father, who, as you know, was a gentleman down in your part of the country and was a brewer. I don't know why it should be a crack thing to be a brewer, but it is indisputable that while you cannot possibly be genteel and bake, you may be as genteel as never was and brew. You see it every day.
And yet a gentleman may not keep a public house, may he?
Not on any account. But a public house may keep a gentleman. If I may, my dear Pip.
Yes?
Excuse my mentioning that in society as a body, the spoon is not generally used overhand, but, under. Now, this has two advantages. You get at your mouth better, which, after all, is the object. And it saves a good deal of the attitude of opening oysters on the part of the right elbow.
This is an amusing scene, and Dickens meant it to be. But he also wanted to show how far Pip has already traveled from the warmth and simple wisdom of Joe Gargery. Pip is beginning to learn about the so-called great world. Many novels that you may have read, like those of Thomas Wolfe, for example, or, like Great Expectations, development novels. In the development novel, the theme is always the same. A young man or woman leaves a simple home, often in the provinces, in the country, and journeys to the big city. The development novel traces his or her education in worldliness, in sophistication, the seductions of ambition, the passions of love. Pip will confront all these things, and under their pressures develop for good or ill. He will pass through some experiences that are unique. Not many of us have a Magwitch or a Miss Havisham in our lives, but he will also have some experiences common to all young men and women who must, by the law of nature, grow up. Thus, Great Expectations is an especially interesting book to read at, say, 17. It's an even more interesting book to read at, say, 57. Time passes. We see Pip, now very fashionable and a bit of a fop, in his rooms at Barnard's Inn in London, receiving an old friend.
Joe!
Hey,
How are you, Joe?
how are you, Pip?
Come in. Come in.
Give me a hat, Joe.
Oh, no, thank you. No trouble over me, Pip, old chap.
There's no trouble, Joe.
No trouble now, Pip. Just let me look at you. Oh, which you've that growed and that swelled and that gentlefolk. As to be sure you're a honour to your king and country.
An honor to your king and country. Joe believes this, and so we fear does Pip. But Joe, we soon learn, has come for more than a friendly visit.
Us two being now alone, sir.
Oh, Joe. How can you call me sir?
Us two being now alone, I will conclude to mention what have led to my having had the present honour of breaking victuals in the company and abode of gentlemen. Well, sir, this is how it were. I were at the Jolly Bargeman to the night pit, where a pint of beer do give refreshment to the working man, sir, and do not overstimulate. But when there come in Pumblechook, and this same identical come up to me, and his word were, Joseph, Miss Havisham, she wished to speak to you.
Miss Havisham, Joe?
She wished, were Pumblechook's word, to speak to you.
Yes, Joe. Well, go on, please.
Well, sir, next day, having cleaned myself, I goes and I sees Miss Havisham, and her expression are then as following. Mr. Gargery, you are in correspondence with Mr. Pitt? I haven't had a letter from you. I were able to say, I am. Would you tell him then, said she, that Estella has come home and would be glad to see him?
Estella?
Well, Biddy, when I gets home and asks her for to write the message to you, Biddy says, I know he would be very glad to have it be word of mouth. It's holiday time. You want to see him? Go. I have now concluded, sir. And Pip, I wish you ever well and ever prospering.
But you're not going out, Joe.
Yes, I am.
But you're coming back to dinner, Joe.
No, I'm not. Pip, dear old chap. Life's made up of ever so many partings, all welded together, as I may say. And one man's a blacksmith, and one's a whitesmith, one's a goldsmith, one's a coppersmith. Divisions among such must come, and must be met as they come. If there's been any fault at all today, it's mine. For you and me is not two figures to be together in London, nor yet anywhere else, but what's private and understood among friends. It's not that I'm proud, but that I want to be right. And you shall never see me no more in these clothes. I'm wrong in these clothes. I'm wrong out of the forge or the kitchen or off the marshes. You wouldn't find half so much fault in me if, supposing you was to put your head in at the forge window and see Joe the blacksmith there at the old anvil in the old burnt apron sticking to the old work. I'm awful dull, but I hope I've beat out something nigh the rights of this at last. And so, God bless you, dear old Pip, old chap. God bless you.
And so Joe, as he says, has beat out something nigh the rights of this at last. He understands now what has happened and has accepted it. Pip, of course, is trapped. Trapped in his dream of Estella. Trapped in the prison of his great expectations. Does he know it? No. He is no more aware of the net of delusion in which he is caught than we are aware of our own heartbeat. But Joe is aware of it. Joe, who cannot construct a clear English sentence. Again and again we shall note that Joe is almost the only person in the novel who always feels clearly. And he is also the one person who speaks incoherently. It's one of the marks of Dickens that he can use the bumbling, wandering language of Joe for two purposes at once, for humor and to suggest to us that integrity of character and smooth manners do not necessarily go together. You and me is not two figures to be together in London, says Joe, with a clear eye and a heavy heart. And back he goes to his forge, and back goes Pip to being a gentleman. We began this film with a scene showing the beginning of Pip's boyish infatuation with Estella. That scene also showed us the beginning of Miss Havisham's demented scheme of revenge. Now it is time for Pip's infatuation to become as obsessive as Miss Havisham's fantasy. The time has come for Pip's heart, as Miss Havisham promised herself years ago, to be broken, as years before that, Miss Havisham's own heart had been broken.
How do you do, Pip? Oh, you kiss my hand as though I were a queen, eh? Well.
I heard, Miss Havisham, that you were so kind as to wish me to come and see you, and I came directly.
Well. Estella. Hello, Pip.
And so Estella, now a beautiful, haughty young woman, has come back into Pip's life. Later, Pip is left alone with Miss Havisham, the strange witch-like creature whom he supposes to be his benefactor. As a boy, he had wheeled her about, imprisoned in her invalid's chair, the symbol of her crippled, distorted mind. Now, a man, he does so again.
Is she beautiful? Graceful? Do you admire her?
Everybody must who sees her, Miss Havisham.
Love her. Love her. Love her. How does she use you? Love her. Love her. Love her. If she favors you, love her. If she wounds you, if she tears your heart to pieces, and as it grows older and stronger, it will tear more deeply. Love her. Love her. Love her. Hear me, Pip. I adopted her to be loved. I bred her and educated her to be loved. I made her into what she is that she might be loved. I'll tell you what love is. It is blind devotion, self-humiliation, utter submission, giving your heart and soul to the smiter, as I did!